everybody.
Evening.
Do we want to start anywhere in
We do. I
particular?
think we're going to start with the budget process. The idea was that I invited any administrator that wanted to come and be part of it to kind of listen in,
Okay,
not be grilled yet, but just kind of understand what the board is looking for this year. And, anything that they can kind of hear in your deliberations and discussions about, things that are going to impact your decision on how we're going to sell this budget. And so I just thought that this might be a good opportunity for them to kind of hear what you're thinking and allow them to prepare when we do get into the details.
Can I ask a real quick question? I just want to apologize for breaking in here and getting off schedule, but I would love to hear how things are going because, we have no knowledge of what's happening. Is that possible, Gerald?
Go.
how things are going with our budget?
How's it going? Like any problems? I know we're not been going to school on Wednesdays. How's that working out? That type of thing. I'd just be curious to hear from the principals real quick if they wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I'm not sure this is really the forum without John around. I think that this is something.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Finance Director. First thing I want to propose, Gerald, is cut the finance business officer and managers pay by 50%.
Thank you. Cut my hours by 50% too.
Could we have a brief recap of what we tried to do last year and why that didn't work as we had hoped it would?
I'm not sure. Last year's a good example because we tried a bunch of things, and then by January, when we started postponing and delaying, I mean, by full on February, we were doing nothing at this point in
Okay.
terms of budget meetings.
Okay, so what sort of framework do you envision us going through before? And I guess what's our target date to get the budget to the board?
To get the budget approved by the board would be the first meeting in May. We'll then have public forums, most likely virtual, like last year, but more of them. And then the budget referendum will be like last year with the amounts and the different articles on the referendum question, not a simple yes, no. So the process itself would be similar to last year's modified process.
How does that impact the federal money we expect to receive? Is that in the timeline?
You mean the COVID money?
Yeah, I guess, well, first of all, the CARES Act money that we haven't received yet, right? So we haven't got any of that, and we don't know what's going on now either.
I mean, if you want to go in, we can go to this now or after.
Let's keep going on the process. Otherwise we get too in the weeds.
5 minutes before you leave, Doug, and I'll jump in and give you the update on those 4 pots of money.
Okay.
So my question about the public forums, I think, Pete, you had mentioned that you were hoping to open up the budget meetings with the board to the public for comments and viewing. But how are we planning on participation for the public forums?
Those will be an open Zoom meeting like we tried to do last year. We had done a public meeting, but we then invited them to actually participate in a follow-up meeting. This year was because we know we're doing it this year. We know what the rules are ahead of time. We can actually plan a week or a couple weeks of a couple of meetings, different times, different, in morning, afternoon, evening meetings, get different groups of people to give them opportunities to hear a budget presentation and ask questions about it before the board actually votes on it in May. So it feels like people are actually part of it.
So those open Zoom meetings would be earlier then?
Maybe, they'd be, I mean, we'd be getting close to probably a budget that we're comfortable with, probably, I would hope, by the end of March, early April.
So pre-COVID, we would have one public hearing on a Thursday evening where the
Correct.
public was invited to attend and make their voices heard. And now we're talking about having several meetings?
Yeah, there would be public, we have to do, I mean, I think both legally and I think just our obligation is to make sure the budget is, that the public is involved in the budget process as much as possible. And so while the budget meeting traditionally is the meeting where the budget is passed, or a budget is passed, I mean, that really is our budget. The referendum is just kind of is an acknowledgement that people agree to that budget number. But there's got to be an
but so the referendum is a vote at the polls, though, right? I mean, we're talking about that's the June vote, the June election.
right. So in a regular year, that referendum just supports the budget that was developed and passed at the budget meetings. That's the budget. That's the public's budget.
Yep.
And that's what
I guess I'm asking, why are we having more than one Zoom meeting? Because in the past, we only had one physical meeting
I think just because
for the public hearing.
I think the obstacles involved in getting people involved in these meetings,
Well, it's no different whether we're in person or via Zoom.
it's up. I mean, we can do whatever the board desires. We can do. I think it's really.
I think it's a good idea, Gerald, because especially with Zoom and what's going on with people, I would have at least a couple meetings. You just need to. I mean, people want to participate. And sometimes even, when in-person meetings, sometimes people aren't available. I think it's not a terrible thing to try to do a couple meetings.
I think if we limit it to two, I don't want to just have like a whole string of these things, though.
Why not, Gerald?
Yeah,
Because it puts the process, it just extends it, and then people aren't there at one meeting, and then something gets said at another, and it gets too crazy and involved. And it also puts a lot more time pressure on the board because we have to be at each one of these things. I mean, they're regular board meetings. So yeah, I mean, and then the precedent is we've only ever had one public hearing on the budget. That's the physical one that we've had every single year. I don't see any reason to really go beyond that. It should actually be even easier for people to join the meeting via Zoom than in person.
What if we did something like a hybrid? So we let the model that I thought we were going to do, where we let people comment on the budget in the comments, but not speak as we're speaking in the video, for all but say the last budget meeting before we approve the budget. So then people can talk before that. And then we have like a standard meeting for the board referendum. Although I do like Pete's idea of having them at different times. I think that's important. But I think that's a challenge for the board in terms of scheduling and potentially for some staff, depending on which staff are there.
And it's not really just to allow the public to comment. It's really, we want to allow the public to affect the budget, to kind of weigh in on changes that they might be considering. Because your budget meeting, remember, anything can happen. We haven't seen that recently, but $1 million could be cut here, or I just want to make sure that we ensure that people feel like they're not being left out, although many will think that anyway. But
Well, they always do. And then how does the voting happen? Or there is no vote?
it's going to be the board's vote. It's
Just the board's vote.
The board's budget that will go to referendum. And the referendum will have the articles listed as they did last year with the amounts. So that's really, so this is, I mean, the public weighs in a much more much more influential way this year and last year than they did in previous years.
So at public hearing, which is the meeting in May, where the board votes to approve the budget, we're going to have a regular, or maybe there'll be two of these meetings before that meeting. But are we going through article by article like we usually do?
I don't know how we want to do that.
And then if we give people 2 hours to talk or wherever, we usually do it, everyone talks per article. Is that what we're envisioning?
No,
And then we vote on the
I
article?
think we're envisioning like the budget. We're not trying to recreate a budget meeting.
Okay, for the public hearing.
A forum that they can support or not support certain areas. honestly, if we could theoretically still have a budget meeting if the board decided to do that, and we could figure out a way to do it safely.
Yeah, I think the voting is not going to happen, but I just think that if we're going to have a public hearing and then the board's going to vote on the budget, whether it's as a whole or article by article, I don't see how we're going to be incorporating what the public has to say just 10 minutes prior to then.
No, the board won't vote at these meetings.
The board won't vote at any of these meetings.
The board will vote at a regular meeting on the budget.
So these are more, but these will be official board meetings, but it's just to hear the public talk on the budget.
There'll be public meetings. They won't be really board meetings.
Will there be other business at these meetings, or is that just the business?
Nope, just public.
So the meeting might last 10 minutes depending on who shows up.
I think they're actually public hearings, not public meetings.
Okay.
I do want to make sure that we don't, since we're doing this before the May board budget vote, that we don't replace board meetings where the board has a chance to ask questions with the public. So I do hope that we're considering these as add-ons and not replacements.
Well, yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
All right.
Just because I'm
Are we
late. I'm
okay with
sorry
just
I'm
having
late.
2 of these? 2 public hearings?
Yeah, we can just further discuss that. I'm not sure what is the best way of doing that. I think we've got time to think about that. The governor just, announced this new change last week.
And I think just to be fair, we should set like at least a minimum amount of time that we'll hang out.
Yeah, I agree.
6:30 to 7 guaranteed, but if more people show up, then we'll just run longer.
That's fine. I just want to make sure that it didn't, last year, a number of board members felt like, or verbalized that they didn't feel like the public was able to weigh in the way they would normally weigh in. And that was not good. So,
Okay. It's just like in the past, all the weighing in at the public, well, there's been no weighing in during the regular board meetings or even these meetings. And then the only weighing in that occurs at the public hearings is somebody standing up wanting to cut $300,000 out of Article 2. I mean, that's like, in essence, that is the weighing in. That's been my experience anyway. So
I think they can, I think in this case, somebody, if that's something, a case somebody wants to make, they just make it. And the board at some point will consider it.
So we're going to bring the budget to the board on the 4th. And then when will we vote on that? 2 weeks after that?
That's kind of my penciled in date for the board voting on a budget.
Because we have to do it like 6 weeks before the referendum or something, before the election.
I've got to recall that with all the changes, I mean, last year was July. It was.
All right, so we're going to tentatively, the board will vote on the budget on the 18th of May. Yes? Okay. All right, so how do we get to presenting the budget to the board on May 4th?
So before we get there, what do we, what is, this committee in particular want to hear about, or what will help this committee do its job at recommending a budget to the full board?
Chelsea, Doug, Lauren, you have any comments?
I always have thoughts on it.
I mean, basically, I think what we need to figure out is just with what our costs are right now, with what the increases are going to be. That's number one.
I mean, the fixed costs, the ones we have no control over?
That's correct. And then also, I mean, whatever that percentage is, I'm almost afraid to find out. And then we have to figure out, in my mind, what kind of help we're going to get from the federal government. And that's my belief on it, because that has an impact as what we're doing.
You mean as far as COVID, the COVID help?
Correct.
Is
then
that
also-
something that can, I know it impacts our budget, but is that something, I mean, how do we do that?
I don't know. I mean, that's one of my questions. I mean, because we're buying school buses, we're doing all this other stuff. So, I mean, clearly that has an impact on what we're doing. I don't know. The superintendent kind of alluded to the fact that there might be some more money available for pay, but we don't know what that is. I have no idea. And then we talked about things like extending the school year, other things as well. So, I mean, to me, it's like, what do you do? I mean, that's sort of like, you can't just go like what it was last year because we got other different needs. I mean, I don't need technology wise, what other things have we bought? What are we buying? I mean, some of the principals might know that answer, but I don't know it. And my thought process is still not going to be normal times next year either. So from my perspective, I mean, it's good news that we have some additional money coming, which we don't know how much that's going to be. Hopefully that will be passed. But at the same time, one of my biggest concerns is, the burden that's going to be put on the teachers as well as the staff. And then what are we trying to do? I mean, what's changing? If anything's changing, are there any additional costs that we don't know about? I mean, how would I find that out? I have no idea.
So
Is it safe to say that we really basically have two budgets now? We have our normal budget and then a COVID budget, for lack of a better
I mean,
name.
that's the most basic way of looking at it. I look at this budget that we're talking about right now as our general year-over-year operational budget. It's not COVID related. These are the things that we've got to do every single year to educate the students in the district. To Doug's point, and I think what we all know is there are a lot of things that we are going to have to do differently, that we've been doing differently, and we'll have to do again, and more of it over the summer, over next year, that's COVID related, like extended summer school programs, both regular ed and general ed, general ed and special ed. There'll be technology needs, like Doug said. There'll be other facility needs. There's still a requirement to maximize the air quality in the buildings. So these are all COVID related expenditures that we have a separate pot of money for. And that pot of money right now is $3 million, Doug. So we received $600,000 as part of ESSER 1 back in March. We really haven't touched that. We've kept that aside because we knew we had flexibility with that. We received about $3 million of CRF money in two rounds. We pretty much spent that on the things that we've discussed. We just received another $2.5 million in ESSER 2 money. So basically we have the 600,000 and the 2.5, so about 3.1 million or $3 million of ESSER money that we have not obligated yet. We have little things that we talked about. Yep.
The 600,000, when do we have to spend that by?
That has to be spent by September of 2021.
Okay.
What does ESSER money stand for?
Oh God.
Well, I'm glad I asked the question.
Oh, it's just the COVID money, Doug. It's just whatever government acronym they stuck to it.
CARES Act, and it's the CARES Act too.
Yeah.
So that's why. So the ESSER, the CARES, all the CARES money, all the COVID money can't be used for revenue. We can't use it to supplement or supplant other expenditures we would have made. The requirement that we couldn't use this money on things that we already budgeted for. That's a little bit different now because we don't have a budget yet. But we do have to maintain our spending per student at current year's levels in order to still use that other extra money from the federal government.
Wait, what does that mean, given that we're under budget? Because we're not spending as much on facilities and transportation and so forth.
It's fairly subjective. It's part of it's language written into the state grant that on the state level it's got to be kept at a certain level. They're using a 3-year historical, like FY 17, 18, 19, I think numbers. That's what they're using as a basis. So we'll be fine with that, even without spending the money. I mean, we're still spending, FY 19 levels this year, FY 20 levels.
So just as a reminder, the ESSER money or the COVID money, whatever you want to call it, it can only be spent in a way that we can justify it's addressing the pandemic issues. And we
It is.
found ways to do normal things, quote unquote, by justifying it as regards to the pandemic, like the 4 buses. And also the build out of the new rooms at South School.
The ESSER money, unlike the CRF money, also pretty much automatically qualifies on any kind of projects that we already do with our Title I money, our Title V money, our local entitlement money, our nutrition money. So any federal program that we're currently working with, we can use projects that also follow those same goals: class size reduction, professional development, feeding kids, supporting Title I activities, supporting tuition to add a district tuition for special ed students that we that might need extra help or that may cross over on that part of the into that part of the can't remember
Are
where
those are those going to be new projects that qualify under those categories, or existing projects eligible?
these will all be new projects.
Okay.
They could be extensions of old projects or expansions of them.
But it's like a grant as opposed to a replacement.
These are all this is all grant money. This is all basic federal grant money.
I think the question that Doug has is how can, if possible, can we use some of this ESSER money, the COVID money, to offset some of our regular budget? And we're not technically supposed to do that, but it can happen. Is that sort of what you're getting at, Doug? Is how do you know what that
Yeah,
impact?
I mean, and also, are there any extra needs that I'm not aware of? You know what I mean?
Extra
clearly-
needs.
Yeah. Like we talked about, additional staff funding, like, for summer school, maybe possibly extending the school year, things like that.
Yeah, we just had a long student engagement task force meeting about how we meet the needs of our really struggling kids during this time, especially. And we are going to have a lot of ideas of how we can basically hire more people to work one-on-one with kids for catch-up related to social, emotional, and academic loss or fall behind. So there's gonna be a lot of needs that we can fund for 2 years to help those kids catch up, and even their family members be a part of that. So there's gonna be a lot coming forward that you guys will take a look at eventually that relates to COVID needs.
Okay, let me ask a question another way then. So like what Gerald's alluding to is, like, if we buy a bus with COVID money and we normally schedule to have a bus, if I'm understanding what you're saying, is we can't do that. Is that correct?
That's correct with the CRF money. So we didn't have any buses scheduled to be purchased, which is why we were able to do that with that.
Because we needed to expand the number of buses to reduce the student load on each of the buses.
Perhaps the way to ask the question is, what savings are we currently realizing that we can continue to realize with the CARES money? Because we are under budget, and some of that is we're not spending, but some of that is also that some of our funds, like buses and things like that, have just been shifted. So how do we continue that? But I'm also a little worried about whether we'll even have a ton of money here, because the student support that we need is not going to be cheap. So how are we balancing all of these needs without like going on a spending spree, I suppose?
But I think, as you can see, we haven't been on a spending spree because we've held back even $600,000 when we had the opportunity to, and just spent the money that we knew at that point had an expiration date. And
That was the first 2.4 million that had to be spent by 30 December, or 2 million, whatever it was.
The two CRF allocated. The actual first money we received was this CARES money, this ESSER money, back in March or April, of $600,000, which we had earmarked a lot of those things, but we were able to move them into this CRF money that had expiration. So to the point to the I don't see that a lot of the savings that we have this year in our budget are sustainable savings. I see them being as one time. So I wouldn't be comfortable trying to reduce our budget with some of those numbers. Not to say that some of the bus payments that are expiring because our leases are being paid off won't come into play. So we might, save $40,000 per bus or $20,000 per bus of a lease payment that might expire. But I think overall, I wouldn't expect that the savings that we're seeing right now translate into into savings next year. I think we're going to try to run that budget as if we're going to operate fully.
Well, this is a good discussion and an important one, but we still haven't got to the question of how do we get from here to presenting the budget to the board on May 4th. How do we, I think Chelsea, you said you had some ideas?
Well,
Or what
I
you'd like
do.
to see?
One of the things that we've talked a little bit about is focusing a bit more on cross-sectioning in addition to departments, so that when we get the department heads in the building, we can actually ask them questions that they are directly responsible for the budget. I think a lot of times there are funds that get divvied up amongst departments. Professional development is a good example here. And because they're divvied up with particular departments as sort of an accounting method, they're not something that each department head is actually controlling. And so I think if we can separate out all of those sort of chunks of money and talk about them separately, we'll have a much better understanding of where our money goes and how to prioritize. Because I think we started to do that a little bit at the end of last year when we were trying to figure out how much money can we cut from the budget. And we started going, well, professional development, we actually spend $100,000 on that every year, as opposed to 250 in this department and 250 in this department, and so forth. So I think it gives us a better understanding. And I'd like to see us really formally engage with cross-sectioning as like a meeting. And then when we meet with a department head, we can focus on things like staffing, changes that they see, short-term and long-term, so that we can start, we've been talking about that CIP plan, start developing those out. I also think that one thing that I haven't seen in the last couple of years is a meeting where we take all the information that we've gotten and we prioritize what we want to see in the budget. So I feel like I tend to approach these meetings as, let me hear what department heads have to say, why they want to have this item in the budget. But then I think we need to step back and say, okay, are we going to keep all of these things? So those would be my two big requests in terms of process, is that we have some time for cross-sectioning and that we have a meeting explicitly devoted to the board looking at all the additional requests. In addition to just like, I would like to see changes really clearly marked, not like salary changes and things like that we know about, but curriculum is a good example. Like, what are we spending on curriculum every 3 years? I think the cross-sectioning may take care of most of that, though. I'm not quite sure.
So we have 3 months basically to get from today to May 4th. I'm more concerned about how we're actually going to meet, not like what we're meeting about. Like, how are we going to get from here to there? How are we going to do that? We're going to have each department head come in, like we tried to do last year. And we did some of it last year. Are we going to have each school principal come in? Are we going to have, I mean, how do we want to have the entire budget all at once and then just talk about it amongst ourselves and then just invite in people that we want to talk to? How do we want to approach this? And
I think
when will the budget be ready for us to look at all as one piece, Pete?
All at one piece will probably be ready by end of February. With all these, so everything, so we'll be meeting with John and Stephanie are meeting with all the principals to align their budget requests, both operational and COVID related, to their goals. And kind of go through the first round of that.
So I think what's best for Pete and his entire team, including the principals here on our call, is that they give us a proposed schedule of how the board, this committee, and then board members who choose to join us will review it. because they have limited time and we need to be aware of their limited time. And I think that what works best for Pete and his team is something that he can propose to us as this committee and including myself, and then we'll make a decision together on exactly how to do that. I think it's hard for us as a committee to sort of like try to figure that out right now. Because I think, again, Pete's a very busy guy and there's a lot of stuff to do. And I want to be aware of his time and everybody's time that puts into this so that it feels extremely doable and feasible for them to make it work. Because in the end, they got to make it work. So that'd be my recommendation out of today's meeting, is that we ask Pete to put together a schedule. Once, he says the end of February, it'll be all put together. Propose a schedule to you, Gerald, as chair, and this entire committee, and myself, as to the schedule we can follow to get to May 4. Because that's our traditional time where we as a board say, the budget is done, here it is, now it's going to the public.
I just want to add a couple quick things myself, based on what I'm doing in my schedule. And I'm only one person, so I'll just let you know about that. But, I wasn't happy with the process either that Chelsea was talking about last year, but it's very important to get our employees and their input, what they would like to do, and explain why. At the same time, everybody recognizes during budget season, it's a challenge for all of us. So, I don't know what the best option is, to be honest with you. And I guess I'd leave that up to superintendent to pick out the times. But for me right now, earlier like this time is better for me than say later. That's one option I will tell you. I'm sure everybody else feels the same way. And the other thing too is whether we take it by sections, staff, transportation, whatever, I don't really care. But the whole point about it is I would like to have a more holistic picture as to what we're doing, because I don't feel comfortable the way, just it's what we had last year. But we got to know what the fixed costs are that's going to go up for staff pay, insurance, things like that. We have to know those things. And the other concern I have, and this is something we're going to talk about later in the marketing thing, I'm definitely in favor of doing a marketing grant writing position for our district. I'm very concerned about our student population, which it's been taking a huge hit. Not only from homeschooling, but I just look at the numbers around us and the cost per pupil and what it's costing us, and it's spiraling a little bit out of control. So from my perspective, I also have to, and this is no different anywhere, I'm sure, but our district has lost a lot of people here in the last couple of years, and yet our head count is not going down. So from my perspective, I got to get a better grasp on that, like what's going on there and what the needs are in each school, what the needs are for our kids. And then, who knows post-COVID, what next year is going to bring for students. But clearly, if you look at the district up the hall, up the street, they're at all-time record numbers, while ours is continuing to decline. So that's why I think that marketing and grant writing person is very important to our district. But I'm just, I am very limited with what time I have, and I want to make it as useful as possible and get as much input from my staff and our employees as possible. That's my personal feeling. And Stephanie was on this call as well, but we got to get a grip on this. We got to get a grip on this because we're losing people left and right, and we got to figure out how to put a stop to that.
It sounds like you really want what Chelsea mentioned was kind of this cross-sectioning of professional development, things, or as an example, staffing, long-term and short-term, I call them sustainable and non-sustainable changes to those kind of programs and people. I'm not quite sure what you mean by the holistic
approach. I want to look at, if I can, budget-wise is very difficult, but I want to look at the whole picture. We know what we're spending per pupil right now at the elementary level, at the high school level, and maybe even the middle school level. I guess that's part of the elementary level. But the point about it is we have certain staff that we pay these people because they're good people and they're helping us. But we have to be very careful when we're losing a lot of people, a lot of students, for whatever reason. We can't keeping that type of overhead going unless we have a plan going forward. So that's kind of like when I look at a holistic approach. And then I recognize with the pandemic, this is not an easy thing to do. I recognize that. I totally get it. I would not want to be a teacher myself during this period of time. But at some point, we got to reel in some of these costs. At the same time, that's why I'm asking about the federal funds, the federal resources, because if we have them during the pandemic, I want to definitely take advantage of them and use them. And if we need to use them for staff, if we can use it for those periods to help the kids, I'm all for it. But if you have no kids to help, what do you do?
I don't know where you're getting your data, Doug. When you say no kids to help, I have no idea what you're talking about.
I'll use last year's senior class as an example, like 60.
No. Last year's senior class was an anomaly. Just check out the numbers. I mean, this year's senior class is again 150, and it's just that was an anomaly, and I just don't see the trend. So be mindful of the data that you're capturing and trying to discuss.
Big figures, but they're probably like 2018, Lauren. I don't know, but
Yeah.
the district is not going up in students. It's not.
It's not, but I will tell you that from these latest figures from the state, we lost, according to our attending student count from October to October, 58 students, which was a lot less than a lot of the other districts of similar sizes in the same area.
And what about homeschooling?
Well, that's where some of those numbers come from. Camden lost probably between the SAD 28 and the 5-town CSD, probably 40. They don't, I'm not including Hope, Appleton, and Lincolnville. I think that our subsidy actually this year shows that relative to other surrounding districts, we didn't lose quite as many. Maybe that's because we lost more in other years, but right now, our subsidy went up this year. RSU 40, it went down. 71 Belfast went up a little bit, but a fraction of what ours did relative to our student count. So I hear you with our declining enrollment, but I think in terms of this year and this budget year, we're pretty status quo, and I think what we need to focus on is how do we construct a budget, giving you information like Chelsea mentioned. How do we support the students that need the extra support, both socially and academically, with a bunch of with whatever the smarter people decide, in terms of summer school or extra social workers or extra help. I mean, I don't really delve into that side of the.
We'll have a lot of ideas coming forward. That's
Okay.
right.
Is it possible to get us the proposed budget by the 25th of February? So that gives us a week to look at it before our next meeting, the 1st of March.
Yep.
So that way we'll have a week to look at it, and then we should be able to see things that we want to, the questions that we want to have answered. And rather just have everyone come in and talk, I think it'd be much better for us time-wise if we invited people to come in and answer the questions, and we could maybe even be able to do it via email. I think it's a better use of our time than just getting presentations about, I needed, 40 extra rolls of toilet paper or less toilet paper or whatever. Yes, Chelsea.
I agree with you, Gerald, assuming that we've got that sort of big picture where we can actually see what the changes are and we can tell the difference between 40 rolls of toilet paper and a teacher. Then yes, I agree. I had two things. One is a question that I just don't understand, and this conversation is relevant for it. The other thing, though, is I think what Doug's, or at least what I'm hearing from Doug about this holistic perspective is metrics. And I do think that there is a real role for using metrics in the board evaluation of the budget process. And I think that the challenge is that we don't have any kind of standardized metrics that we know make sense. And I've been trying to think what kinds of metrics make sense. And I think that's something that we could probably spend some time on, is saying, what is an effective way to evaluate changes over time? What are our sort of target amounts and things like that? The question I had, though, was I was looking over the strategic plan that Gerald sent out, that I guess is our current strategic plan until we approve the new one. But it mentioned that enrollment for this year was expected to be around 1,800, and we're closer to 1,600. So even if we assume that we've got 60 students that's more COVID related, we're still down significantly from what our expectations were 5 years ago? And I'm just curious.
It's actually 2013, but yeah.
Okay, I guess that is more than 5 years. But at any rate, I'm curious why the difference is so pronounced.
I think it'd be interesting to look at town by town numbers, because something that's happening in Rockland, obviously, is a lot of places are being bought by people who don't have children.
Mm.
So I wonder if like Cushing maybe is about the same, or Thomaston, I don't know, but Rockland is a lot smaller. I don't know. It's a good question to analyze. But I think after, because it was 8 years ago, I don't think it's actually not that far off compared to what we were just wondering might be true.
I just want to keep things moving forward. So can we, if you can get the budget to us on the 28th of February, I'm sorry, the 25th of February. At our next meeting, can we then talk about how we want to ask questions? Is that okay with everybody? Because we have other things to talk about tonight.
Yeah, I'm going to have to jump off really quick. So if I can come back on, I will. But if you don't mind, Gerald, let me just make a couple quick comments.
Okay.
I went through I'm going to skip down to number 3 on the agenda.
Well, actually, can you answer my question first, though? Can we get the budget on the 25th and then come back and talk about how we're going to deal with getting it to the board on our next meeting on the 1st of March?
Is that to me? Yes.
No, it's on to Doug.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Okay.
I mean,
And Chelsea, you're okay with that? And Lauren? All right. So, okay. I'm sorry, Doug. You please.
oh, that's all right.
your
I
comments since you're leaving.
apologize for this because I can't be 2 places at the same time.
Yep, no, I understand.
All right, so I guess the student loan payoff program thing, that was Chelsea's idea. I'm not saying it's a terrible idea, but I'm not a fan of it for pursuing it right now. The marketing grant writing person, I think it's a good idea for a lot of reasons. The budget schedule we just hashed over many times over. I looked at the updates that Pete sent out, and I'm pretty happy with what's going on with there. I don't have any issues or any questions about that at all. Just so you know, and for future agenda items, what I wanted to do was just maybe see if we could come up with a way to, for lack of a better word, stream. I did not want to go through a whole bunch of presentations either as well, from what Chelsea was talking about. So I think that your idea of getting the budget by the 25th, looking it over, and then asking questions might be a better option going forward. So, I mean, that's kind of like what I'm thinking as far as our committee goes. The only other thing that I was thinking about, and this is something that we've talked about, is the physical plant, some changes that might have to be made, like what's been going on with the windows in the gym, for example. I've been talking to the athletic director, and she has some needs down to Wasget Field, things like that, things aren't working. So, we have to consider a way to correct some of those things over the next 5 years or less. So I'm not sure it's part of the budget process. We should be talking about that, but I would think we would be. And I'm thinking that anybody who's had some significant increases of things that they need or perceive that they need, we should have that on a future agenda, because right now I know there's a lot of need in a lot of different places. And when I'm talking about physical plant stuff. So that's something that I've been thinking about, and I've talked to some people about that. Other than that, I don't really have anything else.
Okay. Well, thanks, Doug.
I'm sorry, guys.
Oh, no, that's
I
fine.
can,
That's fine.
but
We all have lives.
get to the next one. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
So let me just pass along what Ainsley also has kind of thought about with this regard to the strategic plan and 1,800 students. It's been a long day. We also lost St. George since that was written,
Yeah,
and add that back in, and we're well above 1,800 right now.
good point.
Good point. Right. Yeah.
How many
Forgot
students
about
were
that.
at George?
It was 260.
Oh, wow. So we are actually higher then.
So we're
Yeah, there's 9 classes, and if you figure, 18, 16 per class, it adds up fast.
maybe 200. So maybe it's not 260. So we're
I mean, there's only 11 in my wife's kindergarten class, but that's a really small year.
So the 2013 strategic plan assumed St. George was going to be in the district.
Yeah, they didn't withdraw in
Yeah.
2000.
Yeah, sure did.
And just as a point, the vision that we talked about at our last meeting is a vision. It's not a plan. So even
Correct.
if we adopt this vision, it doesn't change the plan. We still operate underneath this plan.
Well,
it's sort of-
the plan basically expired, so we can use anything we want from any document that we have produced at any time. So just think of it that way, but our vision has changed.
Let's talk about the student loan relief. Pete, did you have a chance to look into that? And
Can I ask you a question?
I'm sorry. Any of the principals, do you want to say anything? We don't want to keep you just listening to us
Right.
go on and
Exactly.
on about the
Exactly.
minutia of stuff. So please, raise your hand, chime in.
I'll chime in first. Sorry, I was making some dinner, so.
I understand.
What are you having? I want to know. What are you having?
Asparagus. We got some steak
Oh,
going.
there we go.
To starch. That's the only thing I have left to figure
How long
out.
will it take me to get there?
You know what? You're not far, Lauren. So we'll figure it out. Well, I think it was good just to sit in and listen. I mean, ultimately, what one of the things I'm interested in is what the board. What is it you want from us as far as our either presentation from the budget or the highlights in a way that makes sense for you all to make decisions on. Certainly, this year is very different. And not knowing what next year is going to look like is going to have an impact, certainly, on what we are asking for. So, however it is you want it, kind of, wrapped up package from us, just let us know, and we'd be happy to do whatever it is you'd like.
Well, I think one thing that Doug alluded to was like any kind of major increase, we like to have that pointed out, and also your justifications for it. But then going forward, as I said before, we really have two budgets. And so you are all thinking about just the regular things, but how are you going to also, how are we going to provide remedial and catch-up help to the students that need it? And that's like this whole second thing. And this is what's hard, is how do we keep these things going in a parallel motion? Because they do have impacts on each other. And so, how about you, Chelsea? Anything you?
Well, I think from the principal's point of view, I think it's the opposite. I think they're just trying to get the kids back where they should be.
Normalized. Yeah.
And we're going to have to kind of help everybody through this process to kind of saying, okay, this is regular money and this is going to be extra support money. We're going to have to kind of figure out what pot of money to put some of these kind of initiatives in to make sure that these students, are served as best we can serve them.
I guess my thought would be that I think this year is so very different that I'm having some of the things that I would normally ask for, like even staffing, I feel a little weird asking for, because the staffing numbers, there's no way to compare them with anything else. They're going to be unique. I do think that the CRF money seems like a whole lot of money, but again, I feel like there's so much need that it's going to go really fast. So I think that really being able to make sure that we are prioritizing that and balancing the needs is going to be very important. So I do think that we've got to figure out how we sort of run these two parallel tracks. I don't think that's necessarily principal's responsibility. I think that's probably Pete's responsibility. But I do think that discussions, that's probably going to play into some of the discussions, but it's so hard to figure out at the moment. But I do think that trying to figure out how we're meeting our students' needs and then paying for that with federal funds as much as possible is a goal I have.
That's what John mentioned last board meeting, that the board will be involved in how we spend this ESSER money, in parallel to our regular general fund money over the next 2 years.
Which because of the timeline, we weren't really able to do with that first $2 million chunk. Hey, and how about you, Ainsley? Do you have any comments?
I just really appreciate all of your hard work toward this budget process. I know you put a lot of time and energy into it, and to kind of echo what Ben said, it's just helpful for us to know what is it that you're looking for from us so that we can justify our needs at our school and help to best meet the needs of our students. So I appreciate all of you and your efforts. Thank you.
I don't want to leave Justin out, even though he's my soccer rival.
I was your soccer rival, but I'm suspending my soccer participation until COVID passes.
I'm only outdoors.
That's exactly it. It's more like skiing now, but no, thank you. I appreciate it. And I do appreciate the thoughtfulness. I think you guys are asking a lot of tough questions, and it's such a big and like wandering budget that narrowing things down, like Chelsea was after, like a metric, is a really tough thing. And I apologize for
No.
background here. But the one thing I wanted to say is that we as individual schools do our own like little needs assessments, right? And a lot of them are data driven, and they formulate our goals and objectives. And I think to some level, I mean, Pete alluded to this earlier, might be helpful to you to see what those are. I mean, we're pretty thoughtful with our goals. And I'd love to share them with you guys. I don't care the format. Like, it could be in this meeting, it could be in a full board meeting, it could be with one-on-one, or just y'all come over and I just show you what I'm talking about, because we're really, I mean, it's clear, for instance, that and I hope I'm not out anything, like math suffered more in our district at the K-5 elementary level than literacy did. Like, that's something we've identified. We have data to support that. And now a lot of the thinking is going around, well, how are we going to remedy that issue? And that is almost easy to identify. The harder part is like, well, how much is that going to cost? Like, what is the remedy? And then how much will that cost? And that's the part where I know I need help. I need help from Stephanie. I need help from Pete. You know, we've got ideas, but narrowing it down to a number, that's the challenge, right? So anyway, I'm just really open to you guys coming and checking out what the goals are and our rationale for the goals. Really willing to share all that. And I think it might illuminate things for you guys.
Okay. No, go ahead, Lauren.
I just want to add that $2 million that we're getting for the next 2 years should be able to fund an army of tutors, mentors, and social workers.
Yeah, the trouble's going to be able to find them, because everyone else is going to be wanting to find them too.
Doesn't matter. We're
Explore
going to do
online
it.
stuff.
Army.
Zoom. They
I
don't need to
will
be
tell
here.
you, I love that idea. I've been preaching it forever. And one of the things that's happened at South School that's really helpful is the waiver for a 21st Century Grant has opened up some resources to us that we have put to really, really good, effective use. And I'm really proud of that work. It's been really good. So if you know, conscientious people goes a long way. But I do think Gerald's right. There's a serious dearth of social workers in this area.
It's going to be hard to get that part, but we got to figure out how to fill the hole so we get that army for our kids, because that's what it's going to take. And we've never had this opportunity ever in my 14 years on the school board, this kind of funding, first time ever to do this kind of student engagement work. It's
And then when we get a
fantastic. So-
grant writer, we'll be able to continue it.
Well, that's the thing. If we get this money for 2 years and we have programming and we have data, then we can have a better chance of getting that kind of funding like you're talking about, Chelsea, because we'll have data of what works. And when you have data of what works, it's easier to keep in the budget. It's easier to get support from the state, perhaps, easier to get support from funders and foundations. So this is an amazing opportunity, not just to help our kids, but to get structural stuff in our budgets forever because it works.
Yeah, I think to follow on Chelsea's point about prioritization, like you all are, you're with the kids every single day. You know what the needs are in each of your schools. And if you could come at us with like, we need to address this math, the problem, whatever, the fallback. And here's how we might be able to do it. But a lesser priority might be phys ed or whatever. It's just that kind of stuff that if you can bring it to us and say, these are the needs that we know we need to address, and these are how we're ranking them in priority. And then us as the budget folks can help, help find those funds for you. Does that make sense? I don't know if I articulated that very well, but.
Well, I also expect Stephanie will be working with them to lead that charge as to if we have some major deficit. She and John will let us know through all of their work together.
Well, I'll share with. I'll share the tool that we're using with everybody that we talked about at the last admin meeting. So you guys are welcome to stay on or not, but I'm just going to share that tool that Stephanie developed. The
Are you
spreadsheet.
talking about the budget prioritization tool?
Yeah, I'm just gonna share that with the committee. You're welcome to stay or take off, but we'll go finish your starches.
I'm going to Ben's house. We're both making asparagus, by the way. It's
So the special at Hannaford's or something?
yeah, I don't know, but Ben and I are right here. We're by brain.
Locked in.
He and I. That's it.
Steak. I want the steak.
I'm just coaching my daughter how to feed the dog.
Well, I'm probably going to scoot along, but thanks everybody, and I look
Thank you.
forward to talking with you soon. So
I'm gonna
Thank
duck
you.
out as well. Hey, thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Enjoy the rest of your meetings.
Wonderful work.
Okay, so student loan relief.
I'm just gonna show you real quickly what we're from. So we're meeting with all the principals beginning, so next Tuesday and the Tuesday after. And Stephanie's been working with them for a couple of years now on their building goals. And so we've tried to kind of create a process where, see if we can do this. That ties, can you see that?
Yep.
So that ties their building-based objectives to what they might need and the financial resources that those might cost. And to kind of split between, things that are tied directly to their objective, student support, staff support. So it could be professional development. It could be, catch-up work or materials for students. It could be technology. It could be air quality. It could be things that they need in their building that allow them to meet their goals. And we're trying to figure out whether it's a short-term or long-term sustainable change, or if it's just one time only. Is it COVID related? Is there, if you're asking for a position, are you looking to eliminate another one to do that with? So is it kind of a self-funding, or is it going to be requiring extra money? So that's the first part, is just the objective-based priorities.
And I assume that it's, even though the box is small, they just expand as they need it.
It's a very magic form.
I mean, like, there's not like writing in like a number.
No, this is all be.
Yep.
Question, how are they, is there, actually, let me ask that question once you finish, because there are a couple of other sections, so we'll see if you get to it.
So the next would be other needs that they've identified in their buildings that are not directly related to their objective that they've set. Same columns. And the third part would be other considerations that, these could be some of the board objectives. This might be the school resource officer, it could be a marketing person. These are things that might come from other areas, not just the building base. But that's what that is in a nutshell.
So the question I had was, what about, how does evaluating older programs and sunsetting programs work here?
For example,
we're adding a new math program because our math, the elementary school, COVID related has declined. So we're adding a new math program. Are we adding that on top of existing programs, or are we replacing existing programs? What's the mechanism for evaluating the new objectives in relationship to existing? Whatever.
Well, in terms of the program, I mean, Stephanie would have to talk to that, but she's always evaluating and piloting different programs to improve upon what we're doing. We're not really talking about the extra support programs here. It wouldn't, I mean, that's not my wheelhouse as to how it's actually the effectiveness of that.
The curriculum, Chelsea. We'll talk
Wait.
there.
What'd you say?
I said, come to the curriculum committee, Chelsea, and we can talk more there. There is a process in place for that. I mean, the math one in a nutshell, we had two math programs going on, and we're one district, and one of the math programs, they no longer even sell the student workbooks. So it was beyond time.
Cool. I probably will not join the committee. I'm going to policy right now for a few months. But thank you. Huh?
Always visit.
Well, I meant join as in join for I'm not taking on another committee. I just meant join for a meeting.
Okay, any more questions? I think that's a good format, and I really look forward to seeing in its expanded use. So the student loan relief program, and I think it would be a nice thing to do. I just don't think it really applies to the RSU because we don't need tax incentives because we are a non-tax paying body. And then it does get into all the contractual things that I think Lauren mentioned. Like, how do we do it contractually? Do we have to go back to the union and talk to them?
While it's a great program, it looks like a great program. It is an additional benefit is a direct cost to the district.
And we are funding ongoing education.
Well, you can't do both. It's an either or. One thing Pete and I were talking about, because it is an additional benefit, and I think I certainly wouldn't support at the moment adding an additional benefit. I was thinking that this would be something that somebody could say, take $2,000 of my salary and divert it to the student loan. And unfortunately, the way the salary schedules work, we can't do that. But Pete and I were having a little bit of a discussion from the lawyer with cafeteria programs. And one question I had was, we already do pay for things like retirement. And I'm not really sure enough about how we're covering any of that. But it seems like if we're already paying for retirement, why not create it so that it's an either or? So that will either fund a student loan payment or a retirement payment, so that if somebody doesn't have the finances to really contribute to their retirement because they're paying off student loans, they're still getting the same benefit that someone who's in a more financially secure position is getting. The challenge is, it does seem like, yes, contracts, salary scales, it just seems like there are a lot of complications. But Pete, it did seem like you mentioned thinking about a cafeteria plan as maybe one way to facilitate some of that. And I don't know enough about any of it beyond everything I just said.
It would be kind of giving a pool of money to every individual to pick and choose which benefits they would like. But that would go to, the biggest one obviously is the health. So that would have to be incorporated into that. So people could actually use any savings that they had from taking a lesser plan to use it somewhere else, either life insurance or bigger retirement or student loan reimbursement, anything else. The 403B is usually a matching plan. With usually just that's accessible to anybody. Not that they have the money to do it. We offer a match just to encourage it, but still that's underutilized even as it is there.
And I do feel like if we're offering a match for retirement, if people aren't taking it, I think it would be appropriate to offer a match for student loan, but I don't know if this plan would really allow us to do it very easily. I like the idea of a cafeteria plan. Have we thought about that before? Because I haven't really heard it discussed in the committee since I've been on it.
It's got to go through a negotiation first.
What about rolling it out for, I think you had mentioned this, non-aligned staff? Because then we can test it out. It's a new shiny object. It might be more appealing in projects.
Yeah, I'm all for that. And I'll continue to figure out how we can rewrite maybe next year's contracts for non-aligned salary. We can maybe introduce that option for some.
Wait, why for some? And not all non-aligned?
I think there's between the hourly and the salary, there might be a differential in what they may be able to participate in. Maybe not. And just, and I guess maybe not mandate it, but offer it.
Mhm.
I mean, people will be reticent to I mean, change is hard sometimes.
Well, how could we even offer? The thing is that when you're staff, you're paying into PERS, the main retirement program.
We're not even touching that. We can't even
Okay,
touch.
okay. I was going to say, because that you're not paying Social Security because of that.
Social Security,
Yeah.
we can't, that's not the retirement we're talking about. We're
Okay.
talking about 403B retirement.
Okay.
So, Pete, what would you need from the committee or the board to start exploring that? Or do you feel like comfortable that you could look
I
into
do
it?
it all the time. I do it all the time. Yes, I'm always asking those questions, trying to figure it out. And that's why I have relationships with those two attorneys at Drummond Woodson, because we're always trying to figure out some ways of doing things better. We've been trying in every negotiation to offer things that we think are better, whether it be paid time off instead of vacation or paid time off instead of sick, short-term disability instead of sick leave banks. There's things that we're replicating internally. You know, we're self-funding sick leave banks when we could do a short-term disability at a lesser
Guys, you
cost,
can't have that discussion.
better for everybody.
Please. I'm in a meeting.
He should have muted.
Then we wouldn't have this enjoyment. Gerald, I never heard them. I just heard you.
What's that?
I never heard
Oh.
them. I just heard you.
Okay. They're right outside my office door.
You haven't heard the cat meowing every 5 seconds. Just a
Oh.
good thing.
Haven't picked that up. Nope.
Yeah, he's been driving me batty. Okay. Well, from my perspective, I think the cafeteria plan sounds like a great idea, and I think we should do it as much as possible. That's
I'll reach out. There was a guy that came in from Cross Insurance a couple of years ago that talked about some of that and really laid it out nicely and actually had it online. It was really easy to use, and it was better for everybody and cheaper
Hmm.
for everybody. But those are tough to sell
yeah.
for some reason.
We need better metrics.
Okay, so Pete, as I understand, we're going to leave you to explore this further.
Yep.
And do we want to put any kind of timeline on this, Chelsea, or just as it sort of percolates along?
It's hard to tell how feasible it is because, I mean, it sounds like I think of non-aligned staff as not having contracts, and it sounds like they do have contracts. So even it's not something we can like wave our magic apple pens and solve.
There's terms and conditions. But we could certainly, because they're individually negotiated, we could certainly invite some to do something different.
I guess what I don't like about that though is that then it becomes very individualized, and I'd rather have something that is sort of common, because otherwise it feels like how do you evaluate equity and make sure that everyone's getting, I mean, not the same pay or things, but the same access to benefits.
They'd have the same access to it. They would just choose not to be part of it. They would
Okay.
choose to do the old way.
So long as everybody is aware of it, aware of the benefits, and has a choice, then I don't have a problem how it gets rolled out.
It would be done that way.
Okay. The board budget priorities. I know we had a meeting where everyone sort of presented their list of things. I mean, I had basically one, which we've already alluded to, and that's how are we going to provide, if necessary, any kind of catch-up remedial work over the summer and then going into the next school year. I think it's obvious that we're going to need to provide some. And this is where this parallel track comes in, because I think this is obviously COVID related and completely justified to fund it that way. But how do we do it, and what is it? And I don't know. I just think that there needs to be something. I have no idea what it is. And Stephanie, I think that might be certainly up, in like your wheelhouse. So I think that's just something that we need to think about.
That is part of the spreadsheet.
And like Lauren, I know that one of your big things is to complete the window project at the high school. And I mean, I'd like to see more trees around schools too, but that's another thing.
Well, the window guys are coming back. They came back on Friday to do a drive-by and give us an updated quote on that.
Nice.
Have you heard what construction costs are doing right now?
Have you
Don't
heard
think
about,
you want an update.
have you heard about what materials cost? A 2x4 by 8 foot
I've-
long costs over $8 now. It's just
Oh, I'm about to get roof
insane.
estimates. I'm not happy.
No, it's insane what materials cost now.
So you're gonna
I-
quote my priorities, Gerald?
Yeah, no, I don't. Well, I don't remember it off the top. I know one of them is actually on our agenda, and that is the facilities audit.
Right. Well, the facilities audit is part of it. It's a larger CIP plan, which doesn't just include buildings, but all major purchases and really making sure that, we know when we're replacing our buses and so forth. And I think we have some of that in pieces, not for the buildings, but we have some of it in pieces. But I think having like an overall plan, because again, it allows you to prioritize. I've mentioned this every year. I do still want some work done talking about regionalizing the admin for adult ed. Middle school, I have some questions around staffing levels. The more I think about it, this might not be the right year to really have that conversation, but I feel like I did have some questions from it last year, but they're not going to be relevant going forward because we don't know what COVID is. So I would say let's strike that for the moment. Wow, my notes are really a mess.
But the Apple Pen doesn't have a little button you push to organize things.
The problem is that I can't look at my old notes and write with the Apple Pen. So I actually have my computer and a piece of paper and my Apple Pen. And so I can't find anything. Oh yeah, looking at the cost centers, which looking at cross-sectioning should hopefully address. But then also making sure that we're reviewing the union contracts for fiscal impacts so that we can make recommendations based on them. Bye, Stephanie. So those are, I think, my big ones. Oh, I feel like I had a new one. Oh, the new one was just really thinking if there are any of the current CRF spending that's sustainable, with the caveat that I do think we're going to have so many needs that money is probably already spent, but trying to balance that.
You figure that CRF money or the ESSER money is going to be over 2 years. We're going to try to make it last, assuming we're not going to get any more. We might get more, but we're trying to make sure we use it effectively.
And I mean, as Lauren said, it's such a fantastic opportunity to really meet the needs of our students that are existing, but have been amplified by the pandemic, that I think it's really good. But I do kind of worry that there's so many needs there, and then we're still going to have some of these COVID needs, like actual COVID needs, like spacing and disinfectant. So I just worry that it's not enough, although it's quite large.
Quite large.
So Pete, do you think that you and John will be like rolling out like a phase 1 of spending? Like this, like a, like, I don't know, in May or whatever, like this is the phase 1 of spending of the ESSER money, and there'll be a phase 2 and 3 and.
Yeah, we just haven't, honestly, I've taken a CRF hiatus.
No, I understand. I'm just trying to get an idea where.
Gather my thoughts and, get reimbursed for what we've spent already and get these projects kind of, we don't feel the pressure to spend it immediately right now. If something comes up, doing it.
Can I just jump in, Pete?
Yep.
So at the task force meeting today, we talked about having to have our programming for catch up and engagement in place by May, because then the people that we hire hopefully can then start their relationships with the kids before they go off just into summer. And then we have summer programming and we have everything else set up, so that I think that, in my mind anyway, I'm thinking that by the end of April, we need to know where we're going to spend that part of the 2.5 million on student engagement. And then after that, what's that?
So no break for Pete.
Well, I was actually just going to bring up that same point.
Already
Lauren.
taken it.
Yeah.
That, because if we do it too late, then kids are gone. They're just more disengaged. So we have to engage them in this extra work for catch up before school ends. So
Well, it'll
I
be a
think
lot
that's the
harder.
logical.
Be a
I
lot
meant-
harder to hire staff too if we wait too long.
I meant the last 2 weeks was my break. I'm
Okay.
getting
Oh,
too
you're
many-
ready.
I'm not ready, but I'm getting too many requests now where, we really need, I really need to think about this because it really impacts the budget. Because otherwise, we're going to have to put some of these expenses in the general fund budget to make sure that we can accommodate, do it right.
So will you and John then come to us with a kind of priority list and that has a timeline to it?
The board, this committee will be involved in all the spending and all the projecting of the ESSER money.
Okay. And I definitely agree with Lauren that the sooner that we have, if we think we need a summer program, I think we're all in agreement that we do, that the sooner we get that in place, the better it is going to be for the quality of the program, because we're going to be hire the right people. We're going to know more about what we need. There's going to be tweaks to it. And then, as Lauren said, we got to market this and get the students engaged, get the families engaged. I think it's really important that the sooner we can roll it out, the better.
While we're talking CRF cares, I'm not distinguishing. For the money that we've already filed, when do we find out whether we are approved or not?
So
For any money we've already-
COVID 3, let's put it that way. COVID 1 is the 600. We haven't spent it yet. COVID 2, it's gone. We
It's
spent it.
gone.
COVID 3,
That's
it's what we're getting now. COVID 3, what John told us today is like, we have to make application and then we get approved basically. Then we bill for it. Like if we fund 2 staff people for outreach at the high school, let's just say, for one-on-ones with kids, and we bill it and we get reimbursed. So I think, Pete, correct me if I'm wrong, that's basically how that goes over 2 years.
But I'm asking about COVID too. In other words, I want to make sure that the assumptions that we made were validated and that we get money for it, and that, that nothing gets kicked back as no or anything like that. Or I'm trying to figure out whether or not that's a risk.
we've had no surprises yet with the CRF billing. So we've already received back half of the money that we've spent, that we've obligated. We haven't spent it all, but we've obligated it all.
We spent mostly all of it though.
Mostly all of the 3 million. Yep, the 1.4,
Yeah.
1.49. So that's mostly been either obligated or spent outright. We've received 1.6 back,
In reimbursements. Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
and the 600,000 from the COVID one
COVID 1.
is relatively unspent. I think we have one position that's come out of that. That we put a position in, class size reduction position in Ashburn for that. We may or may not have to put the second semester of Edmentum in this new money. But because we didn't go ahead and purchase all the technology for the classrooms out of CRF, we might be able to finish that grant with the Edmentum instead, which then protects the COVID 3 money and COVID 1 money, less the one position. But we'll have to think about the Edmentum or something, or either Edmentum or do it internally for the next year or two, if that's still a need, if we've got to do, remote learning. That's $500,000 a year. The window projects was 600,000 4 years ago. Who knows what that's gonna come
That could be that now.
So that's going to be kind of, that'll be, a decision that we have to make. The extra support, whether it be social workers in the classroom or the extra support or the summer school programs, all those are going to be, and we're talking about probably 2 years of summer school in this money.
Yeah.
We're trying to think of 2 budgets cycles with this COVID 3 money, not just the one, because we don't want to just spend it 1 year and all of a sudden have it be gone and have to reach to the taxpayer to fund it for the next year.
Right.
Well,
Yeah,
that's why
So-
I think that we don't have a whole lot of money.
I think I'm with you.
So the windows are out of our budget, right? Catch up work with students is COVID 3, just to be clear. Maybe some COVID 1. But
Wait.
windows, for instance, we don't pay, there's no COVID money for those windows, right?
There is.
There is?
It's absolutely relative to our
Air quality.
air quality project that we've never finished that total
Yeah.
energy air quality project.
Yep.
We have old windows with new ventilation.
Absolutely.
Is that COVID-2 money?
I've written this so many times in my head.
Right. Is that COVID-2 money?
That would be 3.
It's COVID-3 money. All right.
See, that's a quarter of the COVID-3 money.
I know, right.
I
At
don't-
least.
So here's a question. Are we talking at all about doing bonding for some of that? Because, I mean, bond rates are super low. If we could borrow the money, and hey, maybe we could wait a year and see if material costs go down.
They will go down.
So
Yeah,
we-
absolutely.
Good.
Yeah.
So when the board has the appetite, or when the board thinks the public has the appetite for something like that, the windows we could do through an energy project. Again, we could do that through performance contract, which would not actually require us to go to the public to vote on, because it's actually a long-term lease.
Mm.
So theoretically, we could finish the windows through a bond, because basically that's
solar.
what it is. It'd be a 17-year or 18-year, long-term lease. We would just have to make sure that we put that, and that payment would have to go into the budget. But that might be, but that's certainly for, let's see, if $1 million is $70,000 a year, so that's
That's not a whole lot
That's
of,
a teacher. That's a teacher.
it is, but it's
They have
also,
to get done though. I mean, I obviously advocated for these for a few years, but our struggling kids are more important than those windows. So if we find another way to pay for those windows, let's do it.
well, I think that's the whole prioritization that we're chatting about. And like,
And
it-
also
it-
the CIP plan.
and while $70,000 is a teacher, it's also a really small part of $32 million.
I'm certainly willing to put that into our planning, and because we can do that anytime.
When will, what's the next bond that we'll have finished paying off? What year is that?
I think it's, I don't have it with me. I think we just did one,
We just retired one, right? And then,
or about, I think,
because that's one way of doing it, Chelsea, since we already have that bond payment in the line, we
Yeah.
just wait until that one's gone and then we just add the new one in.
Yeah.
Except, and I will say, this is really why we need that capital improvement plan, is because then we can have a long-term, these are the things that we're going to do. And then as each of those bonds roll over, we can slot in particular
Sure,
tasks.
absolutely.
So,
No. Yeah, I mean, it's just, yeah, I mean, my father wrote a program that looked at airlines and when they needed to do part replacement. And it was that same sort of thing. It's just, if there's a time, there's takeoff and landings, and then there's this calendar year. And it's just really nice to know, like, oh yeah, like next October, I need to replace the tires on, jet number 2 or whatever.
and it also means you don't run into deferred maintenance, because that ends up costing more money in the long run.
And that's something that boards are notorious for doing, and it ends up costing you a lot. It's the stingy man pays the most at its most.
What is it they do? What?
We deferred routine maintenance.
Oh, yeah.
So let's not be that board.
No,
Oh,
no,
never.
no. I've tried not to be that board.
it's actually going to be hard for you to be that board in the short term, because we've just undid the previous 20 years of boards.
Yeah.
Spending $30 million on our plant.
But that means now is the time to start actually planning for the next 20 years, so
Yeah.
that the 20-year board is not cursing us.
Exactly.
Okay, so I think that gets us to some other topic.
So the last one to talk about is the PR hire. But first, I want to. It's been announced now that Bill is retiring as the principal at the middle school. Can we announce that job opening? And when can we announce it?
Being announced after the board accepts as a resignation or retirement.
Is that going to happen on Thursday?
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that we get that out onto the out into the real world and get a hire in as soon as we can. It'd be nice to actually have the person transition while Bill's still there, but I know that that's never really possible. The way that
Particularly
things
during
work.
COVID.
We have to dig deep on this one.
Yeah.
Deep.
Wait, what do you mean?
Middle school.
Oh, it's such an
The-
important.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
it's the most critical developmental shift in a human life is middle school years. And then in our particular district, whatever challenges we particularly face, that educational leader is just huge.
Yeah.
So I think
And there's been
John,
so much great work done in the high school that needs to sort of go back to the middle school. That's an important position. I agree.
And they got 4 different cultures of schools coming together as
Yep.
well that throw that
Yep.
whole thing in there too. So
yep.
And they're middle schoolers, which is the most fun age to teach, I have to say.
Oh, yeah,
I love
Okay.
teaching the middle
good.
school. Or
Good.
7th grade. That was a lot of fun.
You got to love it. Yeah.
okay, so I just wanted to throw that out there. It occurred to me while we were talking, actually, Chelsea, while you were talking about staffing. So, and then the last thing is the PR development position hire.
We also have the facilities audit.
Okay. We gotta wrap this up quickly. So, is there any way to get this person hired using the ESSER funds? Just by saying we need a COVID coordinator in our schools.
They would have to do COVID coordinating.
Well, yeah, there's that, but
That's a harder one for me to sell.
okay. So if we're going to say that as a no, I just needed to get the, explore it. How do we get this person, how do we get this position into the budget, and what budget do we do it? Do we do it this coming one, or do we wait a year? And we had talked about this, about we really need a job description first, and who's going to write that. I think that's a really important, critical part of it.
One thing we need
I
to
know I
think
can't.
about- One thing we need to think about is, I mean, Stephanie does a lot of this work anyways, but if we want this person to be able to get grants to continue some of the work we're doing with COVID funding, then we need to have that person actually collecting data because they'll be able to identify the kind of data that they need. My guess is Stephanie probably keeps data that's pretty good for that, but there may be things, I don't know how much grant writing experience she has. So there may be things that she wouldn't necessarily track that we need to track, like really fine-grained detail kind of stuff. So getting them on sooner would probably be better for that reason.
Well, there's a question about this COVID-3 money. I mean, if we could all, it is all about COVID relief, right? So if part of COVID relief is tracking data as to what's working to help our kids who are struggling from COVID-related problems, can we sell it that way to have that person? Because it doesn't have to be right off the bat the most ideal development marketing person. It could start off in such a way that's COVID related and tracking data and generating that information for us to decide funding and support for these kids who are struggling. And then it could grow from there, maybe. I'm just throwing it out there.
Or take a quarter of that job and pay for it that way and pay for the rest of it through the general fund.
Is
Or
that possible?
50-50 or something.
Yeah.
Is that possible to split the salary like that, Pete?
It just requires a lot more tracking of time in terms of federal reimbursements. If somebody's paid 100% out of one grant, federal grant, then you just do a semi-annual report. If they're paid out of 2 different funding sources, they've got to track every hour.
Oh
They're
my
grant
God.
writers. They're used to tracking things.
Oh my God.
So I guess getting back to the actual job title and description, I think that's where we need to start
I
this.
think I don't think it's not this committee's role. I think it's got to go to personnel.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with that. And so how do we get that rolling? How do we get someone to write this job description?
Well, it's my job for that committee to get together, the personnel committee to get together to review something. I'd be glad to put something together if you could all feed me. Could you feed me any sort of like job descriptions you see out there or find on the web somewhere? Just again, that this needs to be presented and always presented as a development and public information person. I'm not sure exactly right, the right term for the second part, but development is the first part because it's about generating money for the district. And then public information is the other side, where it's, you know, the constant communication through social media, especially about what we're doing, what's happening, and kids and staff and everything.
Which actually
Um,
could be COVID related too. That we
Yeah,
need someone
right.
to communicate
Mhm.
what's going on.
Right. That's what I think we should be thinking about, because if we can get this position off the ground and it proves its mettle and how great it is for the district using COVID-3 money, that would be good. Yeah, that would be good. And then sort of like make it flourish from there for that position's work into the future.
Yeah, and I could ask my friend Deb to weigh in on anything that we generate as a framework, if you will,
Yeah,
to give, she is a grant writer,
yeah.
and then to give that to the personnel committee and let them, you know, do whatever they're going to do with it.
Have her send it to me. I mean, I got to be the one to make that
Yeah.
happen. So have her send that to me. If you guys find anything, send it to me.
So are you going to do something first for us to look at, or do you?
Sure.
Okay,
Sure.
and then I'll take that and send it to Deb, and then
No. I'm not going to write anything. I don't have the time to write something.
oh, okay.
from
So
scratch.
you're
I'm
not going to send something to us. Okay, all right.
No, God,
Okay.
no.
So that's my
I need to be
misunderstanding.
fed data or
Okay.
other job descriptions where maybe
Okay.
I can mix and match. I can do
Okay.
that pretty quickly.
Why does the board write the job description? That seems like an HR job.
I don't know. Pete and your staff, I think you're plenty busy. I mean, we all are, but I mean, I don't mind taking a stab at it if you can give me other job descriptions that I can mix and match, because I don't have time enough to write it from scratch.
I like research and copying and pasting. I can totally send you some stuff.
Cool. All right.
Well, I mean, we'll do the description, but we just need to have, you know, what are the board's, you know, goals for this position? I mean, I envision it being, it's a position that is run through the superintendent's office. It's part of that department.
Yep.
And I just think that, you know, we just need to understand, because I'm not convinced that it's a new position. Because it might be a new position for us right now, because the people that I would see, that the position that I see it is already taken by somebody that probably wouldn't be able to do this position, this job. Like I've, you know, told Gerald, you know, the Camden's position, it started out as a individual they tried to hire, it didn't work out, and they ended up just having this person take another job and added this role to that job description. I'm not sure. So it kind of morphed into something where it is now. That's successful up there for them.
But-
You,
and it might-
can you
might-
send Lauren a copy of their, do they have a job description? Since they-
I know they do. They got a job description for everything.
Okay.
And in my mind, I see this as, I think the public relations role is really critical. And I think it's nice to have a face that represents the RSU. Like when you listen to Maine Public Radio and whenever there was something that happened like on the roads, they went to like, let's talk to so-and-so, and he had that really distinctive voice. And I listened to that voice for years, you know, and I can't remember the guy's name, but it's always that same person that, oh yeah, well, you know, the state police are looking into it and blah, blah, blah.
Oh yeah, Steve
Yeah.
McAuliffe.
Yeah, that's him. Yeah.
McFarland,
And so when you have that, I mean, like you just have this relationship with this person or the voice that you don't even know who they are, but when you hear it, you know, he's talking about the DOT, you know, and that's what he's talking about. And I know that's what I'm going to hear from him. And I'd like to see the RSU have that person. And it could be Stephanie, it could be someone that we hire, but just to have a face and a voice that can go on periodically, you know, just put a little video out about like, hey, you know, like we had another case at the middle school, and it was just, you know, just that same letter that we get, but to have it as a video is like really kind of cool. And just to kind of like, there's always that person there that, you know, that the people know, the public knows, that represents the RSU.
Do you think, by the way, thinking along those lines, that we could hire a COVID information specialist for 2 years to not only be funded by that money, but to get that kind of effort off the ground, that kind of flow going? And obviously they would do more than COVID information and development. But again, I'm just trying to think of how we get this funded in for the next couple of years, from COVID-3 money that does the job for COVID-related work, but gets the position off the ground. I'm just throwing it out there. What do you think?
I like that idea, but the more I think about it, the more I keep going back to, we have so many needs. We don't have a lot of money, that I think putting it into the budget is, honest is not the right word. It's more, we need the position anyway. So we're going to have to pay for it long-term. So it makes
Okay.
sense to just go ahead and
Yeah.
Okay.
like it's a hard, there's some metaphor for doing
No,
hard
no.
things. Fill
No, I
in
get
your
it.
own metaphor.
I agree with you. I
Right.
think it works.
Band-Aid
And
off.
Huh?
what's that?
Pull off the Band-Aid.
There we go.
Yeah.
Pull off the Band-Aid and
And-
hire a person.
We're all going to have to be strong in our defense of it, because it's
Yeah.
going to be seen as a non-essential. And we have to really market it as development and public information, but development first, going out and finding more funding sources for the district. So we don't have to rely on local
Well-
taxes as much. I mean, that's the kind of messaging we do and defend it that way.
And I absolutely agree. And this is where we actually failed when we created the assistant superintendent title, because we didn't actually hire a new person. We just moved her to a different title. And we didn't put out a press release that explained that.
Mhm.
We just let Steve Betts say, and then the first comment on the story was, they're hiring more people. And it's like, well, no, we didn't hire anybody. We simply changed the name on her door and on her letterhead.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of stuff that, if we have a PR person, they just do it, but we have to do it just to get them, on board. We have to we have to justify it to the public, as you say, and we have to do a really good job of doing it.
But the way to market the position is not to market it as a marketing position.
Correct.
Yeah.
Totally correct.
Absolutely.
So
Okay.
let's put it in
Yeah,
6
we have,
minutes.
we have a couple minutes. Facilities audit. You want to take the lead on this, Chelsea?
I don't know why it's on the agenda. I'm thrilled that it's on the agenda.
Well, no,
but
because
I-
you keep asking me about where it stands, and so
We'll keep it ongoing then. We'll move it to next month. We'll talk about it.
so
Yeah, I will move it to next month only if we have information next month that is actually like, we are doing X, or this is what Y and Z would cost.
well, that's what I'm just about to get to. So it's like, do we need to hire someone to do it? And if so, who are those people? And do we send out an RFP for that? I mean, how do we get this all moving? I think that's the stage that we're at, is that if we're going to do one, then how do we do it? Like, what are the things that we need to do to get it off the ground? Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
I think checklist right there.
Pete, is that, I don't expect you to have this by the 1st of March, but there's all the other stuff that's going on. But it's something that I think that we need to do, and it's time sensitive, but it's not pressing. We don't have to have it done in 2 months, but it'd be great to have it done over the summer.
Well, we're gonna have to at least get a round figure so we can put it in the budget.
Which means that we need to actually define what it is that we want,
Right.
so that we can send out an RFP and all that. I can do a little bit of noodling just to see what that will entail. And maybe you and Pete, you and I can chat more about this.
Okay. Yep.
All right. Else?
Great.
No, my year-to-date questions were not serious. They'll still be there next month.
Okay. All right. Very good. We'll see you all then Thursday.
All right,
Okay.
night.
All
See you
right.
then. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Thanks.